Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming to you from the Mozaic Works studios for the last video in 2022. This will be a special video. It's about top things that I've learned in 2022. I think it's been quite clear through, if you've been watching this channel for some time, that I really enjoy learning new things, and I make a point of learning as much as possible for various reasons, for my own satisfaction, for teaching others, and for writing books, or for preparing learning programs, different things, or for solving different problems with infrastructure and so on. And this year has been quite interesting in terms of learning. I realized that we've done a lot of things during this year, things that I didn't even realize have started in 2022. For example, one of the funniest videos that I really loved was about the Mazda cars whose sound system was bricked by specific radio stations, and I didn't actually remember that was from this year. I was almost certain that it was from last year, but no, it's from this year. Anyway, I had to pick the top things that I've learned in 2022, and I have three things, but before we go to those, I'd like to start from some behind the scenes information, some things that I've learned that have helped me produce videos for this channel. And there are two new tools that I introduced this year. First is DaVinci Resolve, a tool for editing videos, which is incredibly powerful, very intuitive to use, helps a lot. I've been using it for editing all the videos from the series Alex Learns HTMX. It's been quite some material there, and with the tools we've been using before, I used KDN Live before, the open source tool. It wasn't as good. It would crash on occasion and so on. DaVinci Resolve is just great to use. It's a very nice tool. It requires you to understand how to use it a little bit, but it's very intuitive, and it comes to your help a lot, and I've really enjoyed using it. So this would be my first pick. Editing videos in DaVinci Resolve. It's one thing that I've learned this year and that I plan to do more of and learn more of. Second tool that I started using this year that came up, I think around half a year, was DallE 2. If you don't know it, DallE 2 is an AI tool that uses AI to generate images based on descriptions. And I've used it first for fun, but then I've also created a few images. If you look at the live stream that I've done with Ada Lovelace, it's the picture there was generated using DallE. It's so nice to see this. I quite love it. It's a really great tool that allows me to generate images. So I'm not very good at drawing, but I have a very good imagination, and I often wished that there was a way for me to transform the things that I'm imagining into images. Also ideally into animations or something like that, but even still images, it's a big step ahead. And DallE 2, while not perfect, it brings me this satisfaction of being able to create some images based on descriptions, based on what I'm imagining. And yes, I know there are some issues with AI and copyright, and is it okay for these tools to learn from what's on the internet published freely, or maybe published under copyright, and then these tools learn from it and so on. And I imagine there will be a lot of conversations around this and potentially some lawsuits or some new laws introduced. But the sheer idea of what this tool does is just very fulfilling for me. So I highly recommend you to play with it. Now, before I go to the 3 tools, these were the 2 things behind the scenes, DaVinci Resolve and DallE 2. The runner-up for me is the fact that we've created an open source tool that is now used by and contributed to by more people. And this is something that I haven't done until now, so it's a new achievement, let's say, achievement unlock for me. The tool is called DMARC Reporting. I started it in 2021 because we needed a tool for processing reports, DMARC reports that are sent by email and that allow you to optimize reachability of emails. But these DMARC reports, they come in XML format, and a lot of them, it's processing them, reading through them. It's not the best way of dealing with them because there are a lot of them and it can become overwhelming. There are tools for dealing with that, but most tools work for large companies because they require their own servers, their own infrastructure, and so on. And so I had this idea of, we need this tool, and I also prompted by Thierry Despaux, who had the same problem. So we basically started together this tool, and it was Thierry did a lot of the work. And then one of the best surprises of the year was when Beda Kosata here decided to contribute to the tool with additional features. And so it's really fulfilling to know that something that you've done is actually used by people. This is a tool that certain people use every day. I'm not sure how many, to be honest, and I'm not so interested in these types of number of downloads and things like that. But I'm really glad that this is something that solves a real problem, that multiple people are using it every day, and it was contributed by other people as well. It's such a great example of the power of getting together and solving a problem, a real problem. To me, this was one of the learnings and one of the achievements for this year. All right, now let's move to the next ones. Number 3. Number 3 learning in 2022 for me is the state monad pattern applied to web applications. I got to this by playing around with HTMX, and basically what I did is I implemented in HTMX a to-do list. And HTMX, if you don't know what it is, think of it as a way of replacing all JavaScript on the client side with some attributes on HTML attributes. This would be the simplest way of thinking it in a nutshell. So it would make for you calls to the server side using Ajax and things like that. And I started by playing around with HTMX, then I've added on the backend, a Python backend using Flask, and I arrived to the point when I had to implement the story somehow. And I realized that I have everything stored on the client side. It was a to-do list, so basically everything is there. And then I thought, what about sending all the data from the client side to the server processes it, makes some changes, but never saves and returns the completely new thing. So for example, when you add a new item to the to-do list, you send all the items that are currently in the to-do list to /add, and /add returns whatever you had plus a new item that is the new item that you need to change. And this is the state monad pattern applied to web applications. I've published an article about this on our Mozaic Works blog, mosaicworks.com blog as well. But I published it in the fun and innovative section because I don't see this as being something that is useful. I think it's probably useless. But I also think that it was interesting. It was something that I wanted to try out. Why do I think it's useless? The state gets lost once you close the page. Although it might be interesting to look at other options, like saving the state in local storage. But then, once again, what happens with the state? If you switch browsers, you won't have the data and so on. So there's a lot of things here that are not quite useful. But discovering new things is fun, and it's my top 3 things. And this is for me number 3, state monad pattern applied to web applications or a stateless server side. Number 2 is the socio-technical continuum hypothesis. The socio-technical continuum hypothesis has come up from a number of interactions with Thierry Despaux, when Thierry was talking about various... So Thierry is a big fan of using trunk-based development, and his thesis is that if you start by using trunk-based development, this will bring other advantages with it, continuous delivery, and you'll also get people integrating more often and so on. And it's very possible that this happens. I've recorded a whole video about this. The pluses and minuses of it. But I think what's interesting and what I found interesting is that this is a technical solution to a specific problem. And I think the core problem that it's trying to solve is incremental thinking. And this is a technical solution. It's like, okay, let's use a technical... One of the tools, we'll use it in a certain way. It's a technical way of approaching the problem. And I've realized that there are multiple solutions to this problem, and one of them is on the other side is very social. And very social would be like, working together to achieve the same results. And then I emitted a hypothesis that every problem that we face in software development has a number of solutions on a socio-technical continuum. This means you will have probably an extremely technical solution, you'll have an extremely social solution, and most likely you'll have solutions in the center that are combinations between social and technical. So this is one of the things that I really found interesting, and there's a video about this on our channel, a very short video explaining what socio-technical continuum hypothesis is. And this is my number 2. And my number 1 is domain-driven design and the influence of design on the real world. This was a very, very interesting article. So it started from a very, very interesting article published by Rebecca Wurzbrock on her website, but written together with Matthias Veraes. And it explains something that is very interesting, that design, the act of design, can change reality. So it's never as simple as understand the problem, apply design, end up with a solution. Instead, what happens is that it's a back and forth between design and the real world. And the example here is extremely interesting. It's about an oil rig and software for an oil rig. And part of modeling in domain-driven design, and not only, is to look at names, to name things that in a way that makes sense for the domain. But these names are often used for design. So the language that we create for software design, even if it's inspired from the actual domain language that people are using in their real life, is also different. So one example is from this article, when you had a few scenarios that you get emergency conditions and an alarm goes off on the oil rig, the alarm sounds, and then the engineers need to do something, right? Somebody needs to do something to solve the problem. But what happens when you have multiple such conditions? And if an engineer stops an alarm, what should happen now? Should we have another alarm or sounding? And this can become very, very weird, right, for people in the real world. And so, because of this conversation, long story short, they came up with a missing concept. And the missing concept was alert condition. So they made the difference between alert conditions, alerts, and alarms. The alarm would sound under specific conditions, but those conditions need to be defined because the alarm was something that's very intrusive and it needs to come under very specific conditions. So this concept did not exist before actually designing the software. And what happened is that through the act of software design, they ended up discovering a new concept. And let's say this is natural. But what is more interesting than that, after we introduced other conditions, the early engineers incorporated it in their language. This change in the domain is driven by the design. So this explains a very, very interesting case where you have design and reality which influence each other because they are actually in a system. What we're talking about here is actually an evolutionary system, right? It's a system where people using software influence the software, but also the software influences the behavior of the people. And the language that you're using in software is coming from the real world, but then some of the terms from the software also influence the terms used in the real world. And I think this is very profound because software requires us to define things much more precisely than any other domain. And this is one of the things that we learn with this from this approach, from this example, that these very specific things will influence also the real world. So you have to look at the whole thing as a system. We cannot separate software from the rest of the world. Okay, so to recap, two tools that I used behind the scenes, DallE 2 and DaVinci Resolve. Highly recommended if you are editing videos, if you want to play around with image generation. A runner-up, creating an open source tool, DMARC Reporting. There now also has a little brother, another tool that written in Python that downloads DMARC attachments from Gmail. Still work in progress, but might be useful for you. And then top 3 learnings: state monad pattern applied to web applications or stateless server side. Useless but fun. Socio-technical continuum hypothesis. Every problem in software development probably has multiple solutions ranging from extreme technical to extremely social. Domain-driven design, and in more general, the influence of design on the real world. These are my top learnings. What do you think? What were your top learnings for 2022? Let us know in the comments. I love reading comments, so yeah, please let us know. Thank you kindly for the watch, and until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart.